Hello and welcome. I recently spent over 100 hours journeying across the continent of Orstera. In that time, I beat Octopath Traveler 0, I collected all the characters, did a ton of side content, and spent a whole bunch of time testing out different characters in combat. So now, I want to talk about which ones are the best in my opinion. Of course, there are a lot of uses for different characters, and I don't think you need to have a party of the best characters. I don't even know if you need to use any of the best characters if your goal is simply to beat the game. If you're not enjoying using powerful characters, go with the people who you like, whose stories you enjoy. But if you want to know who's strong, you want to kill bosses really quickly, do OP stuff, watch this video, and then check out my video on how to get some OP items that I'll link up in the card and down below. So, with all of that out of the way, let's get into things. Okay, so here are all 36 characters for Octopath Traveler 0. Here's my tier list. S tier, one of my favorite characters, or someone that I had amazing success with. A tier, from my experience, they're great. B tier, they're pretty good. I used them, I enjoyed them. C tier, they're just okay. D tier, used them, was disappointed. F tier, bad. F minus tier. You'll see about that later. There's a special reason I have F minus. Now, as a note, technically there are 36 characters, 35 that you can encounter throughout your journey, plus the protagonist who you must use. I'm not going to count the protagonist here, because the protagonist can kind of be always S tier. They're super OP, and they have a bunch of super OP ultimates, and they're automatically magically good at everything and have no personality, so that you can feel like you're also magically good at everything. Which actually means I'm going to put them in F minus Y, because I think they're the worst part of the game. Or maybe the second worst part. I'll get into that later. But, jokes aside, let's get into the tier list. Starting with Alaune, the Queen. Now, you get access to her fairly late game. She is a consistent character throughout the story, but she does not become a playable character until pretty late. And she's somewhat like a cleric, though her skills sort of sit in between cleric and dancer from my experience. Buffing, protecting allies, some offensive magic, some healing. I'm going to put her in A tier, because I think her toolkit is very solid, and she's one of the best healers in the game. Also, her ultimate not only heals, it restores FP and revives. Really, really strong ultimate. Next, we have Alexia, a scholar who you encounter in Theatropolis. And it took me a little bit to warm up to Alexia, because at first I was like, okay, she's a scholar, but she only has Shadow and Lightning. Those elements feel a little bit limiting. Still going to put her in S tier. There's two reasons for this. First, she has passive analysis. Every time she acts, she identifies a weak point on an enemy. This is really good for fully identifying weaknesses on bosses. Second of all, her ultimate hits like a truck. So she can use the Shadow or the Lightning. Later on, you can give her a whole bunch of other elemental spells to break enemy shields. Then she's able to nuke them. And, unlike many of the other casters, she has a self-buff for her elemental attack. Alright, then we have Alphen, which if you played Octopath 1, that's right, he is a returning character. He has Vigorous Strike, really strong axe attack. His ultimate gives everyone BP, which is really good for unloading. So I think just based on his ultimate, he's up here. And he's a pretty solid healer that you get around the mid-game. I do think a couple of his super late-game characters outclass him, but for now, might change my mind later, I'm going to go B. Okay, then we have Bargello. Bargello is sort of a thief. He has a couple interesting mechanics, one of which he automatically acts first. Another, he has skills that deal additional damage if he acts first. He did not click with me. I'm hesitant to put him down in bad or bad. I don't think he's a bad character, but he did not click with me, especially since I usually use my Thief for debuffing, and I found it difficult to replace my debuffer with someone else while also being able to steal. Then you have to give him steal, you have to give him Snatch Mastery. So yeah, I'm going to put him in C tier. Alright, Corinda, Merchant. The problem I have with Corinda, she's going to go in math, is she's a late game character, and by that point, her toolkit's fairly similar to Protagonist Merchant. I think Protagonist Merchant does a better job. I also think, unfortunately, there's another merchant that does a much better job and is available much earlier. So, D, math. She has, like, one cool skill. Alright, Kelsis. My experience with Kelsis, maybe I just used him wrong, but my experience was that he was bad. He's sort of a tank character. He's a thief, he's sort of a damage dealer, but it felt like his tank toolkit was purely defensive, and also he's a thief who can't steal. Not particularly good at debuffing outside of his taunt. Alright, Cyrus. A scholar returning from Octopath Traveler. Out of everyone, he very much fits the traditional scholar role the most. He can identify weaknesses on enemies, he has elemental stuff. For me, what pushes him into S tier, up here with Alexia, is the fact that his ultimate hits 6 times. 2 fire, 2 lightning, 2 cold. So, it's quite good at breaking enemy shields. It does a considerable amount of damage. I think he's amazing. Delicia, a hunter who you get fairly early on. She's a pretty good debuffer. I do think some late game characters end up outclassing her, but I used her for a very long time. And for that, I'm going to put her in B tier. I think she's a very solid pick. Her ultimate debuffs enemies, buffs allies, which is particularly nice. It's just not quite as comprehensive as some of the later buffs or debuffs you might get. And so, Delicia is good. Next up we have L, who I'm going to put in math for the simple reason that she joins your party for a very specific part of the quest, and then leaves your party and never returns. So, I don't particularly like characters that I can't use for literally like 95 hours out of 100. I think she was in my party for about 5 hours. D tier. Next up we have Eltrix. Now, Eltrix is interesting because she's in the tank archetype, and she has much more direct ways to force enemies to attack her. She can literally take attacks for allies, which is interesting, but like with Bargello, she's another character that I tried to use when I got her, and she simply did not click with my style. So, C tier is kind of becoming the, I think they're probably strong, and I might have just used them wrong, but since this tier list is based off of my experiences, I'm going to go with, maybe if you're just a little more niche, didn't fit with the team comps I was using them in. Next up we have Esper, who goes into D tier, for the same reason as Corinda. Specifically, you should get Alphen before Esper in most cases, and I think Alphen outclasses Esper. Alright, Goodwin, another character that I really wanted to like. He's a dancer. His kit is more about debuffing enemies, which he does a pretty good job of, and dealing some damage with lightning magic. And at first, I thought he was quite strong. Well, I shouldn't say at first I thought he was quite strong. I still think he is quite strong. I just think he is outclassed by the actual scholars because he's a dance scholar, and you can often give some of his best skills to other characters and they'll do better with them. So ultimately, I think he's okay. I think he is niche. If you like him, absolutely use him. The turning point for me was when I had both him and Cyrus in my party. He does an ult, Cyrus does an ult. His was level 3, Cyrus at level 1 did more damage. Okay, Hamet, returning from Octopath 1. Easy S tier for me. Why? Summon Linda can do sword and polearm damage, which is really unusual on a hunter. In fact, she's the only hunter that can do that. In addition, she has Rain of Arrows, which is really good for breaking shields. Arrow Storm, AoE version of that. She has an accuracy buff for an entire row. Ultimate hits 3 times, does AoE damage. Yeah, she is really, really strong. And you can train Alphen's Vigorous Strike and give it to her, and then she nukes the thing for like 60, 70k. Haideen, a thief who passively steals. And for that alone, A tier. It's really nice to not have to worry about stealing stuff from bosses because you just hit them a bunch of times and, oh look, the items from their pockets are now magically in your pockets. She also has a gimmick where if you pair her with a protagonist, she gains a damage boost. I found this to be sometimes annoying, as there were times where I wanted to pair her with a different character and felt like I couldn't without losing damage. But aside of that little caveat, I do think she's a strong character. Okay, next we have Isla, and this is going to be a hot take. Prepare yourself. But I personally think Isla is overrated. Why? Isla is a Kate scholar, cannot analyze enemies, cannot discover weaknesses. Also, deals non-elemental damage. So you are entirely reliant on trained battle skills for that. Now, Isla does have a really cool passive that massively increases his single target damage at the cost of turning AoE skills single target. This is cool until you want to actually do AoE damage. So, for those reasons, I'm going to put Isla in A tier. Now, if you already broke an enemy, you just want to hit them very hard, Isla is excellent for that. I think Isla's regular Arcane Meteor was hitting as hard as Alexia's ultimate. So, very good for damage numbers. But the thing that I always struggled with was breaking the enemies, not dealing damage once they were broken. And so, A tier. Next up, we have the Cleric Lorana. I used her a fair bit. It's not that she's bad, but ultimately I didn't click with her because I think other healers and supports end up outclassing her. So she's going to go in D. Ludo. Ludo is a merchant, and a damn strong one. His negotiate ability means you get a lot of extra leaves passively, especially if you're using things like collect and snatch in addition. So, for that, I'm going to put him in A tier, and he is also why Corinda gets bumped down to D tier. Corinda's toolkit's actually closer to Protagonist Merchant, but ultimately I would say that Ludo, who comes in sooner, has a very differentiated kit, more polearm skills, can also learn all the OP bow stuff like Arrow of Fortune. He's a better merchant. Alright, Macy. I'm sorry, Macy is bad. Every other healer and support does her job better. Originally, I actually really wanted to like her kit because I wanted a more offensive support. The problem is, plenty of other supports can be built to be more offensive, and Macy's ultimate is gives a random buff. Sometimes it's nice, most of the time it's not. Ulbrich. I'm going to put him in B tier. I used him for a while. I think he's a very good mid-game character. Late game, I think other options outclass him. The weird thing about Ulbrich is you have to either use or train him to get surpassing power to hit for over 10,000. So he's good. He's certainly a solid warrior, but also it's real weird to have to use someone like that just to get surpassing power. I personally think surpassing power should have been a mechanic that got unlocked through gameplay and just applied to everyone passively, so that you don't have to sacrifice a passive slot and shuffle stuff around. It's needless annoyance and micromanagement. Okay, Ophelia, another healer, also very strong. Now, it's kind of hard to differentiate the toolkits for Ophelia and Alaune. Both of them do a lot of very similar stuff. They have powerful heals, they have some light magic. Alaune has a little more light magic, Ophelia has a little more healing. Main difference, Ophelia has a damage mitigation ult, Alaune has a heal, SP restore, revive ult. But Ophelia's unique skill is an AoE revive. Also, Ophelia can be healed beyond her max HP. This is trainable. Give it to your healers. This way, they can do the whole mass revive thing if your party's wiped. So I think they're A tier. I think either one is an awesome endgame choice, and you probably won't use both together. Next, we have Fen, who I used early game. I do think the other hunters outclass him, so Hanit and Delisha, and as a result, he goes in C tier. He is okay. Next we have Pius, who is also okay. I used him a bit. I found him to be stronger than Lorana, especially because he has a AoE party buff ult, but he isn't quite as good as buffing up your defenses. Next, Primrose, who was my favorite character in the original Octopath. And I'm going to have to put her into D tier, because her toolkit just felt very inferior to the other dancers. In addition, it kind of felt like they were just sticking her in and sticking most of the characters from Octopath 1 in, so you can go, oh yeah, I remember them, I like them, rather than because they actually fit within the story. None of them fit within the story. None of them were integrated within the story. So yeah, D tier. It's not that her kit is particularly bad, it's just you can take the best parts of it and put them on other characters. Okay, Raimi. Late game warrior. Absolutely insane damage potential. There's two things that make her insane. First, multi-hit ult. Her ult hits 6 times. And she has a passive that causes multi-hit skills to deal more damage against broken enemies. So once an enemy is broken, she unloads. Second of all, she can get her BP back. She has like a 50% chance to get her BP back. So you get to 3, you boost. And then you deal max boost. And then you get it back and you do it again. And you do it again. She is very fun to play. S tier. Alright, Richard. Richard is, I guess I'd say halfway between a dancer and a warrior, which is a really interesting place to be. I actually quite liked his story and his personality. I don't think he's for everyone. I don't think he fits into every team comp, but I do think he is very strong. I enjoyed using him, and his ultimate's kind of insane. So, I'm going to put him in A tier. Rondo, Knight Ardent. Another late game character, and one that, like with Eltrix and Bargello, I struggled to use. I don't think Rondo is bad per se. I don't know. At this point, I just change this to niche. Like, these are all niche. You know what? That's what I'm going to do. Which I guess means technically Fen and Pius don't fit, but whatever. They're okay, everyone else is niche. Next up, we have a dancer slash support, Saoirse. I believe that's how her name is said. I said it wrong the first time in my previous video, and the comment section corrected me, so thank you for that, and I'm sorry if I'm still getting it wrong. Easy S tier. Why? Her ultimate is insane. It lets you bypass weaknesses. So, you no longer need to worry about, do I have the comp to counter enemy weaknesses? Now it's, of course you do. Just buff, multi-hit characters. Watch enemy shields melt. Give, like, Raimi, 1,000 spears, bam. Super, super fun, super OP. In addition, when she gives people HP regen, something that carried me in the early game, she also gives them SP regen, which carried me to the early game, which has got even more defensive buffs. So yeah, really good character. Definitely enjoyed using her. Okay, now we have Xanthos. The first time you get him, he is insane. He is by far your strongest character. But then he leaves your party. And then you get him back, and he's still quite strong. And then he leaves your party. And then you get him back, and then he leaves your party. And then ultimately you get him back and he's still strong, but he leaves the party too many times, so he gets a B tier because he is not there when I need him. Solon, the Wise King, sits at an interesting junction between, I'd say, Scholar and Thief. Scholar and Son with a Sword. And this earns him a B tier because he's got some interesting things. He has solid castery stuff. But I didn't find his passives to be particularly strong, and outside of Mass Analyze, I also didn't find too many uses for him. But he is still a solid caster that will do good damage. Okay, Stia. Available from the start of the game. And honestly, I think Stia is pretty solid. I do think, ultimately, other supports, like a Laune, like a Philia, even like Alphen, outclass her. Saoirse for sure. But for a support healer that's available from the start, she's quite good, so B. Alright, you might be wondering why I've had this F-Y. It's for Tatlock. Because I do not understand why that character is even in the game. I'm pretty sure it was just so that they could put a waifu with big tits to get people to spend on the gacha game. That's it. Such an annoying personality. Her entire story arc makes no sense, where she's evil, she attacks everyone, and then just suddenly, magically, because someone treated her nicely, she's sort of good now, while saying she's not. In terms of raw power, yes, her kit is quite strong. Power alone, pretend she is in A tier. But, for being so annoying and having such an awful story, F-, why does this character exist? That is also why the protagonist is here, because I think the game would have been better if the protagonist was not in the game, and instead you got to use the characters who actually had a personality and were actually interesting. But now that I've said that, let's delete the row based on story, and put Tatlock in A where technically her toolkit places her. But I still don't like it. Therion. Gonna go B. He's a strong debuffer. He can steal things from enemies. He has a good toolkit, and he's available for most of the game. The only reason he doesn't go up in A is because it's a little weird to have two thieves who do the same thing. I did end up using him over Hydeen for a while, but especially with her passive steal, the later I got into the game, the more I thought she was the better choice. That said, if you just need to debuff enemies, Therion is very good at it with very little investment. Okay, Tressa. Tressa is bad. I didn't enjoy her in Octopath 1, but there she was OP. Now, there are more OP merchants, like Ludo and Protagonist Merchant. So, Tressa, I'm sorry, F tier. Okay, next up we have Viator, another early game recruit with a very interesting ultimate, where he retaliates, does a ton of damage. For whatever reason, this is the only tank character that actually clicked with me. I don't think he can quite go in A or S, because enemies do still need to attack him, he still needs to deal with or survive the damage, but there was undeniably a time in the early and then mid-game where his ultimate retaliation was carrying me. And so for that, I'm going to put him in B tier. I think he is a very solid character who's well worth using, and if you like the idea of forcing someone to attack you, go with Viator. Alright, then we have Zerk. He's another scholar. His Soulstone gimmick did not resonate with me at all. It's fine. I just feel like he is the weakest scholar. And since there's 2 other strong scholars, plus King Solon, who's sort of a scholar, ultimately I'm going to put Zerk in C tier. He's niche. If you want to throw a bunch of soul stones, use him. Otherwise, probably not worth the time. So, this is my overall tier list based on the characters that I personally found to be the most powerful and the ones that I had success with. And so I think this about does it for my coverage of Octopath Traveler 0. I'd say it's been great, but honestly, the game's ending left me feeling a little bit mixed. I may get into that in a future video. Please let me know down below if that's something that's interesting to you. But otherwise, I think I'm going to call it good here. With that said, if you want some more guides, you can check out the Best Protagonist Job, focused on the early game, but a lot of the stuff still applies late. How to get powerful forbidden weapons, best early and mid-game comps, sort of a companion video to this. And then also the secret character / item guide, which goes over, well, a bunch of items and characters, which are really powerful, and you can get them, well, some of them anyway, quite early. That'll be up in the card and down below. It also contains information on how to recruit Isla, for example. And so, with all that said, I'm going to get going for now, but thank you very much for watching to the end. I'm glad you've enjoyed. Remember to get subscribed for more content, and with that, I'll see you in the next one.